In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, peace be upon you all. Welcome to the series Islam and Atheism. Today is the third session of our series of discussions. Let us begin. Thank you very much, Ghamidi Sahab, for your time. Ghamidi Sahab, human knowledge begins with the realization of existential realities. As for how this realization becomes knowledge, you said there are 7 points through which we will try to understand our simple everyday process in depth. Some points were brought under discussion. Let's resume the discussions from where we left off and clarify the context as well. Also, tell us more about the process by which human knowledge becomes certainty.
I had said that there are 7 points. We have already understood the first point. Elaborating on the second point, I have written our self-certainty. That is a kind of certitude or confidence that we have about something. Our self-certainty of the existence of an external world. That is, there is an external world around us, is in fact grounded in its certainty that it is distinct from what lies outside it. That is, when I say that something is external to me, then I cannot have this certainty without considering myself separate from it. This is an obvious fact.
Clear.
This means that the self distinguishes between the knower and the known. The knower is the one who knows. When I acquire the knowledge of the external world, or when I have its knowledge, then I am a knower. And the external world is the known. This means that the self distinguishes between the knower and the known. That is, between the one who perceives. That is, there is someone who is perceiving. That is, it recognizes the one who perceives and that which is perceived as separate. This is an applied explanation of the same point. Our self-certainty of the existence of an external world is, in fact, grounded in its certainty that it is distinct from what lies outside it. Since it considers itself separate from the external world, therefore, based on that, it develops certainty within itself that an external world also exists outside of it. This means that the self recognizes the knower and the known, that is, between the one who perceives and that which is perceived separately. That is, I recognize myself and this table, myself and you, myself and this room, myself and this world. I recognize them as separate. This is a definitive reality for. Now this is the reasoning. This is a definitive reality, for if it were not so, the self would regard the perceived as united with itself. That is, in that case, it would not have been able to observe it as separate. It would have considered itself and the external world to be unified, as united with itself, and would never be able to form within itself the certainty that the perceived, that is, the things he perceives, that the perceived is an external existence separate from its own being. That is, it would never have been able to create this certainty within itself that the perceived. What it sees in front, what it perceives, what is being transmitted in its senses, is an external existence outside of itself. It would then never have been able to create this certainty within itself, since it considers itself and the external world to be separate. This understanding of being separate has created that certainty and that affirmation, this knowledge of the self, that is, this awareness of its being separate from others. This knowledge of the self does not derive from its reasoning that led it from an effect to an effector. That is, it was not that the world or I first discovered the connection between an effect and its effector, and then the concept of separateness emanated from it. That is not how it happened. This knowledge of the self does not derive from its reasoning that led it from an effect to an effector. Rather, it is among the very conditions and premises of that reasoning. It is actually a requisite. That is, only if one considers oneself separate from the external world, to feel one's being as separate, to feel the external world as separate, only when both of these are considered different and distinct from each other. In other words, it is only when their separateness is acknowledged as a prerequisite that the connection between an effect and its effector would be derived. Only then would that knowledge be generated. This knowledge of the self does not derive from its reasoning, that led it from an effect to an effector. Rather, it is among the very conditions and premises of that reasoning. Thus, just as the self distinguishes between itself and the external world, that is, I am me, and there is a world outside of me, just as the self distinguishes between itself and the external world, so too it distinguishes between itself and those effects that come upon it as its internal sensations.
An example, please.
That is, on the one hand, there is this external world I believe, consider, and feel it is separate from myself. In the same way, some sensations arise within me as well, like sorrow, pain, like distress, anger, etc. All these sensations arise within me as well. I believe and consider them as separate from myself too. The way I create a difference and distinction here, in the same way, I create a difference and distinction within myself as well. So, it is I who is getting angry. It is I who is feeling pain. It is I who is afflicted with sorrow. It means that I consider and believe sorrow and myself to be separate and distinct from each other. So these are the internal sensations that arise within me. Thus, just as the self distinguishes between itself and the external world, so too it distinguishes between itself and those effects that come upon it as its internal sensations. On the one hand, is the sensation I feel when touching this table. This is a sensation from outside. On the other hand, I feel pain and I sense it inside myself. So both these things are present in me separately. This distinction and differentiation, that is, distinguishing myself from the external world and distinguishing myself from my internal sensations. The separation of myself and my internal sensations, and the separation of myself and the external world. This distinction and differentiation, if you reflect, is possible for it only because it can perceive the subject and the predicate and the essence and its accidental properties separately. That is, when I make myself a subject, for example, my name is Zaid, and regarding Zaid, I inform you that he is black. Zaid belongs to the East Asian descent. I'm informing you about myself. In this introduction, I have established a subject-predicate relationship. In this relationship, I know the subject as separate from the predicate. Without it, I cannot say this sentence. It is in fact an expression of my distinction and separateness if we look closely at its reality. This distinction and differentiation, if you reflect, is possible for it only because it can perceive the subject and the predicate and the essence and its accidental properties. Accidental properties, that is, those things that come upon us but are not an integral part of our being. That is, they are not essential properties. They are accidental properties. As, for example, this is a table. This is the color of the table. This is the shape of the table. Where is the table placed at this time? These are its accidental properties. All these things are only temporary. They are not essential to its existence. That is, it is not that if its color changes, it would no longer be a table. If there is a change in its shape, there are dozens of shapes of a table. It can be a dining table. It can be a reading table. It can be a coffee table, which we sometimes place in our drawing rooms. All these changes in shape and color are accidental properties, and I can distinguish between these accidental properties and the essence of a table. It is possible for it only because it can perceive the subject and the predicate and the essence and its accidental properties separately. That is, I see the difference and the distinction separately in them as well. The self has not acquired this. That is, this distinction and differentiation. It is not an ordinary thing. The self has not acquired this through thought, deliberation, or the arrangement of premises. That is, since childhood till now, this distinction and differentiation have been known to me through my internal inspirations. I did not draw this conclusion through logical arrangements. There is a difference between the table and the color of the table. This thing was not taught to me. That is, it was not taught by arranging all the premises and deducing conclusions from them. It is inherent in me. The self has not acquired this through thought, deliberation, and the arrangement of premises. Rather, it has been inspired within it by the originator of its nature. Earlier, we had said in the preface that these are inspirations. The word inspiration has been used in the same meaning here. That is, it is an internal revelation that has already granted me this differentiation and distinction. Now, I only express it. That is, this differentiation and distinction should be regarded as more firmly established than and prior to our certainty about the external world. This is its requisite. If it is not present within me, no further arrangement can be established. Knowledge cannot be initiated. It should be regarded as even more firmly established than and prior to our certainty about the external world, for it is the very foundation upon which our certainty concerning the external world rests. That is, the foundation of our certainty about the things we see in the external world, or even about the entire external world itself, is the ability of differentiation and distinction which is present within us.
Correct, it is clear.
This was the second point. Now consider the third point. This is in fact our everyday experience. It is only being clarified here about how the foundation of our knowledge about things is laid, about what the basis of our certainty about them is. Is it based on some reasoning? Or do we inherently possess that certainty at the time of our birth, just as we possess our senses at birth? The third point, included in this inspiration, is also the understanding. This is another aspect of it. Included in this inspiration is also the understanding that attributes cannot be conceived without a subject. That is, if we reflect all the attributes we imagine, we do not observe them independent of a subject. They appear only as attributes of a subject. Included in this inspiration is also the understanding that attributes cannot be conceived without a subject. Thus, just as the self is certain that it is a being. Look within yourself. You are filled with the certainty that you are a person, a distinct self. Thus, just as the self is certain that it is a being capable of bearing attributes, that is, I know you as a separate being and myself too, and that I may or may not be a scholar, I may or may not be ignorant. You see, I am considering these attributes separately from the subject. I am understanding them separately too. They become clear when associated with my being, and when they become clear only after they are associated with my being, then I am certain of my being. And I'm also certain that my being can possess attributes, so too it is certain that it possesses attributes which subsist only in that very self. That is, first, I am certain that I am a being that can possess such and such attributes, and second, that the attributes I possess right now are not separate from me. They exist with my being. For instance, if I am a scholar, then being a scholar subsists only with my being. If I am ignorant, then it is an attribute related to my being, which I feel in the same way, and I know it with the same difference and distinction. This was the third point. In a way, this was only a derivative of the second point. After this, look at the fourth point now, moreover. That is, besides this differentiation and distinction, to understand what is outside as separate from oneself, to understand oneself as separate from others, to understand attributes as separate from oneself, and to understand the connection between the self and its attributes, which is stated in the third point. Moreover, the self inclines towards some things and avoids others. That is, when I saw a flower, I hastened toward it to smell its fragrance, to enjoy it, and at times I pluck it to hold it in my hand. Moreover, the self inclines towards some things and avoids others. That is, it likes to avoid some things and is attracted toward others. Moreover, the self inclines towards some things and avoids others. If we reflect, this is what we do all day, sometimes expressing our inclinations, sometimes our aversions. Moreover, the self inclines towards some things and avoids others. In the same way, it judges some matters to be beautiful and others to be ugly. For some things, he would say, It is absolutely hideous. It makes one feel disgusted. For others, he would not stop praising. What a beautiful thing. And there are numerous aspects of beauty that he describes separately. That is, a couplet is beautiful from one aspect, music is beautiful from another aspect. A chair is beautiful from another aspect. A human being is beautiful from yet another aspect. So if you just take beauty and attractiveness, he is expressing his knowledge of differentiation and distinction among their various aspects. Moreover, the self inclines towards some things and avoids others. In the same way, it judges some matters to be beautiful and others to be ugly. That is, such and such a thing is ugly. Why is this so? It is only because the self can distinguish between renunciation and choice, and between what is desirable and what is detestable. It is only because the self can distinguish between refraining and choosing, and between what is desirable and what is detestable. What did we understand earlier? The self can differentiate between two things. Now we see that when it is attracted towards something, it chooses it. And when it wants to avoid something, it rejects it. So, what is choosing? What is rejecting? That is, what does it mean to take one thing and leave another? And if something is desirable for me, or is among my desirable things, I like it and am attracted to it. Another is repulsive for me. It is among the things I dislike. Only because it can distinguish between rejecting and choosing, and between what is desirable and what is repulsive, and because it is certain of its capacity for choice and agency, I not only know what it means to reject and to choose something, that if I like something, how it becomes one of the desirable things, and if I dislike something, how it becomes one of the undesirable things. Along with these, I am certain of my will, choice, and agency. That is, I can choose or refuse something. I can like it or dislike it and avoid it. So this is the certainty of my own will, choice, and agency. I can adopt it if I want. If I wish to adopt it, I can bring it into use. I like this fragrance, I have bought it, and now I will use it. So you see, if you analyze these things, then the certainty of rejecting and choosing, the distinction between desirable and undesirable things, the certainty of choice and agency, all this is being manifested through my actions. Its life itself depends on this certainty. That is, what is my life? If this certainty is taken away from me, do you know what happens? Have you ever seen someone who lost their memory? What kind of life is that? Its life itself depends on this certainty. Were it not endowed with this, that is, if it were not born with this certainty, neither striving for anything nor the intention of any act could be conceived of it. That is, if I cannot differentiate between rejecting and choosing, if I do not have the certainty of choice and agency, how can I make an effort for something? It is this certainty that moves me that I can achieve something, and then I start working toward it. So this could never have happened if it were not within me. And not only that, there could have been no intention for any action, because an action is intended due to attraction or avoidance, due to the consideration of beauty or disdain, or due to the certainty of having the choice to select or reject something. It is obviously that certainty which moves me to put in effort and creates in me the will to act. Were it not endowed with this, neither striving for anything nor the intention of any act could be conceived of it. The truth is, just as its certainty in matters of knowledge and perception is inspired, we have clarified this point earlier. Just as its certainty in matters of knowledge and perception is inspired, so too, in matters of choice and will, action and agency, pleasure and pain, and hatred and love, its certainty is likewise inspired. This is exactly what my life is. I am using choice. Today, I plan to wake up early and go to morning prayers. I plan to mold such and such thing according to my liking. I plan to use such and such thing. I am getting pleasure. Something has become very painful for me. I hate this thing. I love something. All of these are inspirations within me as the knowledge of my being, the relation between a being and its attributes, and the difference and distinction between me and the external world are all inspirations. So this difference, this distinction, and all these things are actually due to those inspirations which have been embedded in me with my being and my creation.
The point is now clear. Human knowledge consists of only two things, self and matter. These two appear as things and as the manifestation of their potentials. Humans access them through their senses. External senses access matter, and internal senses access self. The knowledge they provide constitutes existential realities. Why does it constitute existential realities? What are those inspirations in humans? Ghamidi Sahab is explaining those in detail. There are a few more points that will come up. After that, keeping all these things in mind, we will examine one existential reality and try to understand how these 7 things impact the creation of knowledge from perceptions. We ran out of time. God willing, we will be back again. Thank you very much for your time till now.